What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Icy Rain build guide. This is one of my favorite weapons in the entire game, and the devs just gave it a massive buff, so it is so strong right now, and it's crazy. It's crazy. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so before we get into the weapon itself, we have to go over what is Frost Vortex. The devs did recently just give Frost Vortex a major buff. So Frost Vortex. Trap enemies within a 4.5 meter radius and inflict 50% PSI intensity as status damage per half a second for 4 seconds. Up to 1 Frost Vortex may exist at any time. So that's actually huge. They did just change 3 different things about Frost Vortex. Alright, so the first major change to Frost Vortex from what it previously used to be is that 50% PSI intensity as status damage. That used to be 30%, so that was a nice 20% increase right there. Now the second major change to Frost Vortex was that status damage ticks every half a second for 4 seconds. That used to be 1 second, so they brought it down by half a second, and that alone is huge. It might not seem like a whole lot, but that's a lot better than it used to be. And the third thing that the devs changed was that up to 1 Frost Vortexes may exist at any time. That is probably the biggest change to Frost Vortex, because up until now, Frost Vortex has always been able to have at least 2, if not more, vortexes all at one time. So that one is the biggest one. Now they did actually buff that. Now that 1 Frost Vortex proc is going to be equivalent to 3 Frost Vortex procs from the past. So the way that Icy Rain works is crit hits have a 30% chance to trigger Frost Vortex. After creating Frost Vortex, automatically reload 20% of your bullets, or your ammo capacity, whatever you want to call it. I don't know why they named it that, but Frost Vortex damage factor plus 30. That's just an increase of 30% to frost damage. So the way this weapon works is kind of weird and different from other frost weapons. So Frost Vortex itself doesn't actually crit off this weapon, but you still need the crit hits to be able to proc Frost Vortex. But I'll show you in this clip right here, as I am proccing crits on this dummy, I am triggering Frost Vortex on repeat over and over and over. And basically the whole point of this weapon is the more crit rate that you have on it, up to a certain point, the more Frost Vortex procs you are going to proc. Alright, and so the mod that you would want to use with this weapon would be Cradle Blast. Which Cradle Blast, after triggering Frost Vortex, increases Frost Vortex damage by 4% up to 5 stacks, lasting 4 seconds. Now, this is by far the best choice for the Icy Rain, because as you saw earlier, we were proccing Frost Vortex on repeat. So just imagine when we get into the full crit build of this weapon, how many Frost Vortexes we're going to be proccing. So that is going to be like a permanent 20% Frost Vortex buff that you will get. And you do also want to run this in a Frost Vortex suffix. You do want to look for things like Frost Vortex damage and frost damage. Now, you can get frost duration increase as well. You can get all 3 of them on the same mod. It's really rare. If you do end up getting that, that's really good. However, I'm not worried about the duration too much. So as long as you get the Frost Vortex damage and the frost damage, you're good. In my case, I did get 4 different damage type mods on mine. But to see how this mod works, we are going to equip it. We are going to back out, pull out our weapon, go back, check our details. So we are currently at 4.8% frost elemental damage bonus. That is just going to be from this frost damage right here that we get on it. So as we proc Frost Vortex here, so if we go back and we check our thing, you can see right there on our details, we now have 26% Frost Vortex damage bonus. So that is really nice. Like I said, it's going to proc Frost Vortex on repeat. So you might as well use it. Alright, so there is a second weapon mod that you could run if you wanted to go down this path. This weapon is the best in the game at doing this, and you're going to basically be like a healer on steroids. So that mod is going to be Frosty Blessing. When Frost Vortex disappears, restore 10% HP. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you're proccing 6 Frost Vortexes in a row, I mean, that sounds kind of crazy to me. And I'm personally not the biggest fan of this mod, but I did try it out and I used it inside one of the Nightmare silos. And it was actually kind of insane. The consistent healing that you get from this mod is almost worth taking this over the Cryo Blast, specifically for like the Nightmare silos. So I can definitely see why some people would prefer this mod over like the Cryo Blast. But if you want to be the best healer inside the whole entire game, but only heal yourself, this is the weapon for you. But basically, if you want the highest crowd control in the game, the highest self-healing in the game, and the highest consistent DPS on repeat, I'm talking steroid procs, this is the weapon for you. This is the weapon for you. You don't even need to watch anymore. This is it. Alright, and so moving on to the weapons calibration, we will be running a heavy style X2 crit rate on this SMG. Now, that heavy style is super important for this SMG because the more ammo that you have, the more ammo that you're going to get back when you proc Frost Vortex. And what's even more important is that X2 crit rate on this calibration. You need that crit rate on this. As you can see here, we have a total of 23% crit rate already from the calibration. And when I go and shoot this dummy over here, you can see that I am constantly proccing Frost Vortex on repeat, never having to reload. Alright, so getting into the attachments. So this weapon does have extremely bad accuracy, like really, really bad accuracy, which is, you do want to fix that because that is what makes your bullets tighter. So the stability is not a big deal because that's just your recoil going up and down. You can control that just by aiming down sights, but you want the accuracy as high as possible so your bullet spread isn't too bad. So we're going to go with the multi-break, compact reflex sight. Okay, and this is the important one right here. So you can either go elite vertical grip, or you could also go for the Cobra grip. I will go for elite vertical grip because I'm not too worried about maxing my accuracy out that much. But you can go for the Cobra grip if you don't have the elite vertical grip. And for the magazine, which is also the most important part, you want to put on a weighted SMG gold mag. Said more ammo for your SMG. More ammo, more damage, more bullets. Getting into the ammo, so I personally use blue tungsten ammo. Now, disintegrating ammo would be better for this SMG because you deal 10% more damage to targets affected by Frost Vortex. So that's a nice little bonus right there. But if you don't have this or you just can't afford it, I mean, AP tungsten's fine. Or honestly, this weapon eats through so much ammo. Blue tungsten, I don't know how everybody's just not using blue tungsten. The amount of ammo this thing eats is crazy. For the Icy Rain, the curveball will give it crit rate, okay? Which is huge because remember we talked about the Icy Rain bases its procs off of crit rate. So we are also going to get the bullseye effect as well. We get an additional 15% crit rate. Now, when I shoot this dummy right here, you will see the number of procs I trigger are significantly more than what I triggered when I was just testing the calibration on the weapon. That is how much of a difference that this bow makes by itself. And we haven't even gotten into the other stuff that is going to benefit this even more. So if you think that is a lot of procs, just wait. Just wait. Alright, and so getting into the key item for the build, there will be two options. One of them is the more preferred way, however. So the first option and the best option, especially for Icy Rain, would be the Frost Tactical Vest. Now, Frost Vortex generates ice spikes that deal frost damage of 120% PSI intensity. If you look here, you could see the ice spikes forming every single time that Frost Vortex procs, which with Icy Rain, that is a whole ton. And this did recently just get buffed as well with an additional 20% PSI intensity because it was at 100% PSI intensity. So this is the big DPS key item for Frost Vortex right here. However, you can run the Stealthwalker wraps if you want to. The Stealthwalker wraps won't do nearly as much damage as the Tactical Vest will. So Stealthwalker wraps Frost Vortex collapses in the center and keeps pulling in enemies within 1.5 times the vortex's range. Alright, so like I said, it's just you shoot it, you proc Frost Vortex. When you proc the Frost Vortex, a little crystal is going to spawn in the middle. It is going to just grab all those enemies like a big hug, like a big bear hug, and just suck them in. It's actually kind of ridiculous for the crowd control. Now, like I said, you don't do as much damage as you would with the Frost Tactical Vest. It's fun though. I mean, I really do like this key. I'm not going to lie to y'all. And in certain situations, I probably would use the Stealth Walker wrap over the Ice Tactical Vest. Now, getting into the first armor set that we're doing for the high damage build, we'll be running a 3-piece Treacherous Tide set with a 2-piece Lone Wolf set. Now, the reason we're running the 3-piece Treacherous Tide set is because of that second line right there, the 12% status damage that you get, and the third line, which you get up to 28% more status damage depending on your sanity. So this is the low HP, high damage build right here. You'll be getting a total of 40% status damage. We're not really worried about that weapon damage because the Icy Rain doesn't really rely on that very much. And then we are also pairing this with a 2-piece Lone Wolf set for the magazine capacity and the 5% crit rate that you will be getting. So not only do we get 40% status damage, we as well get 5% more crit rate and magazine capacity with this. Now, the Icy Rain is one of those weapons that is an exception to the Treacherous Tide set, to where you don't actually need to wear the Treacherous Tide set and have low HP and all this other kind of stuff that a lot of people don't like to get good results. The Icy Rain is a very, very good starter weapon. This weapon was used a lot by beginner players back when the game released, and we didn't have the Treacherous Tide set back then. And so now getting into the second gear set that you can wear, that's actually the more ideal set to wear, would be a 4-piece Shelter set. So a 4-piece Shelter set at 2 pieces will give you 8% element damage. At 3 pieces, you get each weapon hit grant 1 stack of Deviant Energy. Every stack of Deviant Energy grants 1% elemental damage. The effect can stack up to 20 times. Okay, so you can get up to 20% element damage from this right here. Okay, and you pair that with the 8% from line 2, we're already at 28%, and it gets even better. So at 4 pieces, you will get another 10 stacks. We can get a total of 38% element damage, and you don't have to worry about the reloading removes half of the total stacks because you won't be reloading very often. So this is the ideal set that you would want to run, because you will get 38% element damage. I am just running the 3-piece Treacherous Tide set because I did not have the upgrade attempts to get the Shelter set, and I run a low HP build. The Shelter set, best for new players, best for pro players, doesn't matter what you are. I would highly recommend this set. Alright, and so getting into the mods that you should be wearing for this build. For the helmet, we are running Deviation Expert. Deviation Expert will give you fire rate plus 10%, status damage plus 20%. This is very, very big for the Icy Rain because you get additional fire rate for your never-ending reload of a weapon, and status damage plus 20% because Frost Vortex is status damage. And we are running this in a lunar suffix for the element damage and that status damage that we will be getting the lower our HP is. Now, if you don't have a lunar suffix, or if you don't want to go the low HP way of this build, you can run this in a Talent's suffix. Like I said, the Icy Rain is one of those weapons that you do not need to make low HP or lunar. You won't do as much damage, but you will still have that insane crowd control and never-ending reloading. So it makes it worth it. Now, another option for the helmet, if you don't have enough crit rate for some reason at this point, you can run Faithful Strike. Now, I did test this, and Faithful Strike was doing almost the same amount of damage as Deviation Expert was doing, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you're getting crit damage from it, but you are getting a 10% crit rate from it. So, but you're losing out on that 20% status damage and fire rate of 10%. However, when I did test them, they were kind of neck to neck, and this will give you an additional 10% crit rate. If you need that, you can wear this for the Icy Rain. Alright, and so getting into the mess mod, we will be running Frost Wave Wither. Now this one did recently just get changed as well, and Frost Wave Wither Frost Vortex's final damage plus 30%, decreasing by 8% per second over time. So we're pretty much going to be getting that 30% Frost Vortex damage increase consistently because our Frost Vortexes proc on repeat. So really that 8% per second over time doesn't really apply to us very much. So this is the strongest one you can wear for the key suffix mod for the mask. And as well, we are running this in a Frost Vortex affix. Alright, and so getting into the chest mod, we are running Critical Rescue. Critical Rescue, damage reduction plus 20%, and healing received plus 20% when HP is below 30. Really the only reason we're running this is because it's a lunar suffix. And we're getting that status and elemental damage from lunar. Now, if you don't have this mod right here, or if you don't have any lunar mods, you can just run something like the blue Flame Resonance, which will give you 12% extra status damage. So for new players or players who don't want to run a low HP build, this is the one you would want to run for the chest. Alright, and so getting into the bottoms mod, so we are running Elemental Resonance. There aren't a whole bunch of mods that you can be running for this that really benefit that much. And so for each instance of elemental damage dealt from the previous magazine, the next magazine gains elemental damage plus 1% for 15 seconds. So I know this mod says upon reloading gain the elemental damage, and with the Icy Rain we're not going to be reloading a whole bunch, but this is the only really decent mod that you can run for this weapon. Now sometimes you want to purposely reload just to get this buff. Like if I'm shooting enemies and I'm stacking up elemental damage, I will purposely reload my weapon just to get this extra 24%. And as well, we're running this in a talent suffix. However, there are downstar versions of these mods. I don't have any good ones, but ideally you would want to run a downstar mod. If not, then talent's okay. Alright, and so getting into the gloves mod, we will be running Crit Boost, which Crit Boost will give you additional 15% crit rate. Once again, this one is kind of necessary for the Icy Rain. Yes, you are going to be missing out on stuff like status enhancement or the elemental one that will boost your element damage. However, this mod alone with the calibration make it so much better, and the damage difference is actually pretty big. We are running this one in a talent suffix as well. And getting into the boots mod, we are running Rush Hour, which I run Rush Hour for all of my builds. Now, every 10% HP loss grants 4% melee weapon and status damage, so you can get up to a total of 40% status damage technically. However, you pretty much be dead. So you can really get up to like 36%, which is still massive. We are running this one in a talent suffix as well. If you did not want to run Rush Hour, you can run Covered Advance, which will give you a 20% status damage increase for 30 seconds without taking damage within 4 seconds. This one would be good for the non-low HP builds. Alright, and so getting into the Cradle, we will be running Anti-Phase, Status Enhancement, Tactical Combo, Elemental Sense, Extreme Freezing, which is the big one right here. And for your last three, you can run stuff like Deviant Energy Defense, Tactical Leap, which you do need this one. This one's pretty big. This will give you an additional 20% damage against Deviants as you are airborne, which if you equip like the double jump drink or spring legs and you just jump, you will be getting this bonus. So this one is a must right here as well. And for your last one, you can either equip a bullseye mod, which is Bounty Hunter. And for your last one, you can equip Marked Strike for when you're marking the enemies with the crossbow. Now, if you're doing a Nightmare Shadow where you need more than just the anti-phase, you can go ahead and unequip Marked Strike, and you could put on something like Anti-Void or Anti-Coherence in place of it. And so now getting into the Deviation, so there'll be two of them you can run. My personal favorite one is the Polar Jelly. So as he continuously deals frost status damage to surrounding enemies and force them to move towards you, increases frost damage received by surrounding targets by 39.2%. If our vortexes are formed inside the radius, create additional ice spikes. So this is the one I would run for like bossing and stuff like that, because this one will do the most amount of damage. And the Starfall one as well will give you an additional 5% frost elemental damage. But the second choice that you can run, if you didn't want to run the Polar Jelly, is the Snow Spirit, which the Snow Spirit regenerate ice crystals to the target every 3 seconds. as crystals shatter when shot, dealing 100% frost damage to nearby enemies and causing them to take 48% frost damage. So the only reason I would pick the Snow Spirit over the Jelly is if I was running something with a bunch of moving enemies. I still do prefer the Jelly over the Snow Spirit personally, but the Snow Spirit is very good if you're running silos and there's a bunch of enemies moving everywhere or the boss doesn't hold still. Alright, and so getting into the fit buffs, we will be running the Whimsical Drink for the drink buff. You will run the Whimsical Drink to get an extra 25% status damage bonus. This is very beneficial, especially for Frost Vortex. There is no other drink buff that you really can't run for it, so this would be the best one. And then getting into the fit buffs, we will be running Surprise Spring Roll. Now this will give you elemental damage 5 through 15%. It would double if your HP is below 40%. This is probably the best elemental food in the game, even better than the canned minty meat, which will only give you a base 15% Frost Vortex damage. This can give you up to 30% extra elemental damage, which is much better than the minty meat. And this is the best elemental food for Icy Rain. And for the second food buff, you can run Mixed Fried Hot Dog if you are doing bosses or if you are a chef class. You can pair this with the Surprise Spring Roll. Now the Surprise Spring Roll with the Mixed Fried Hot Dog is so strong, and I highly recommend it for bosses. Overall, I will say that Icy Rain is one of the best and funnest weapons in the entire game, and I deeply missed it from the start of the game, so I'm very glad that they buffed Frost Vortex. Whether you're a new player or you're a returning player, I would highly recommend using Icy Rain because it can be catered to both styles and is one of the best crowd control weapons, if not the best, in the entire game, and it's just absolutely insane. But that is all for this build, and I will catch you all in the next one.